Hello, Mech fans. This is Duncan Fisher. Hold on firmly to your mana potions, fireballs, and familiars, because you are tuning in to your regularly scheduled episode of the First Circuit Podcast.
Hello and welcome everyone to the First Circuit Podcast episode number 122. Your guests today include Lash.
Hey.
Old Bob.
Hello.
Biter.
Blarg.
Myself, Ian Tuzeri, and then we have an actual guest, NuttyRat.
Good morning, everybody. How you doing?
Today we want to talk about some things that we've talked about a lot the past few weeks, and to keep it fresh, because it's still an ongoing topic, so we kind of want to keep talking about it, but also to not make it not too slow. We've brought in someone who hopefully can offer us some different perspectives. So, NuttyRat, I think most people in the community know your name, but do you still want to introduce yourself? A few sentences?
Sure. My name is NuttyRat. I'm the host of the NuttyCast, a variety streamer, but I play a ton of Mechwarrior Online, a little bit of BattleTech, a little bit of Mechwarrior 5, live, usually through the weekends, starting on Thursday nights through Sunday nights. Kind of what I'm probably most known for now is the MWO Happy Hour, which happens every Friday night, and one of the founding members of Mechwarriors United Twitch stream team as well.
Cool. All right. Thank you for being here, by the way. I don't think I've said that before.
My pleasure.
So
Yeah, thank you, actually.
Thank you for
Thanks,
being
man.
here, and thank you for offering your insights.
All right,
I'm
good
hoping
podcast.
today's gonna
Bye,
be
everybody.
See you guys later.
We're done. All right, fantastic.
And there we go, everybody. We're done. See you later.
Yes.
Bye.
Okay,
All
so by the
right.
no seriousness, what we want to be talking about again is the merge of the group and solo queue thing that has been going on for the past few weeks, and kinda the conclusion of a test. So to quickly summarize, a few weeks ago, PGI noticed finally that group queue has been dead in its form, and they tried to figure out what they could do to save group queue, get rid of group queue, anything they could do to make match finding quicker and better for everyone who wants to still play the game. And basically what they tried to do is get rid of group queue altogether and introduce the possibility to take small groups into solo queues. So groups up to 4 player. At max, they can be 5 player on a team that are in a group with a max group size of 4. And that's what's been going on for the past 4 weeks. They've played around a bit with the matchmaker, tried to balance something like skill rating, weight class, match time, all those things. We've talked about that. And, well, this week, the 4-week test has been over, and we have some final results.
Okay, so I'll say one of the big things here is that with our end of test, do we know if they're going to keep it in for next month, or is this going away and going back to default? It's probably a big question for everyone out there.
It's staying, as said in the most recent post, I
Mhm.
think, isn't it?
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
doing a recap there.
Yeah, it's gonna.
Yeah,
I mean, they're gonna spend the amount of time there. It's staying. I would have to say. Let's wait for this test.
Yeah, and Ian, if you want to do another quick zoom in there we go.
There we go. So this is the important part. They have decided to keep the current combined queue. Silence.
Yeah, so that means we're gonna be kind of we're in the new normal for Mechwarrior Online. So how can we kind of make it the best the best possible experience for kind of folks of all kind of skill levels, of all kind of focus within the game, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I've spoken for a while, at least, of course, that the changes wasn't just really necessarily groups being added to solo queue. Like that has slightly changed results. They say that stomps have gone up approximately
5%, I think.
initially 5%,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
currently it's now back down to just a 1% increase. So at those times where one team only loses 2 or 3 mechs and absolutely kills the entire enemy team, is only increased 1%. Now, we're not sure exactly what that is. 1%. It's an absolute 1% of all matches, or 1% of an increase compared to before. I'm still not really certain on that, but still 1% is at least hopefully such a small number that it, for the most part, it wasn't that much of an impact. Speaking myself, though, at least I felt that the biggest change was just mostly to, well, solo queue in the sense that lancers were mixed tonnage all over the place, and the priorities of the matchmaker have changed. And for groups, it meant you could, was you can't do 12-man or 8-mans anymore. You are able to actually fairly quickly now, as long as there's matches still going on in MWO, groups are still able to play in group queue. You don't need exactly the right combination of groups to match up for a 12v12 or an 8v8 anymore.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, we're talking about percentage numbers when you're talking about stomps, and one of the things that we don't know is 1% of what, of how many matches over how many times, right? Over, like, what's the time scale? What's the what the number of matches that we're talking about? I know kind of folks in, some of the more competitive folks that are out there have seen their stomps, increase significantly compared to what it has been in the past. And it's, simply the power that a 4-player group can really have on a match, right? Like, even we look at matches that were dropped last night on my stream. We weren't even running against like the super high skilled players, like top tier players, but certainly people that were in groups, or probably this was Thursday night, sorry, not Friday night. But they were in a group, and they had a coordinated build, and they owned the match. Like, it was their match to play. And then the rest of us were kind of, we were there, we were good bullet sponges, right? But the kind of the one criticism that I have kind of about this whole combined queue is solo players tend to take a little bit of a backseat. There's other things that we could bring up as well, around kind of, I'll say, the danger of a merge queue that, I realize, the results we're keeping combined queues. We know that the queues are kept, but what the potential impact is for some people, and the other part of this announcement that hopefully will help to mitigate that a little bit.
Yeah, indeed, because the other part of the announcement was that they are considering relooking over PSR rating. That way, as you mentioned, at least, that there are cases where, a group of better than average players could all form a group of 4, and they will just win match after match after match. And even if in total, like, they play 10 matches throughout the night out of thousands of matches, that is still going to have an impact, and it still isn't fun for those 10 matches whoever's on the other side. If, however, they are matching up against the other groups of 4 who are above average as well, and if the T has actually meant something, then that would very much help assuage that concern.
Yeah, but there's a lot.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Bob.
No, man, go ahead, man. It's cool.
I was going to say, like, but there's so many unknowns with this whole potential kind of reset or reconfiguration of PSR, we'll call it, in that we don't know what that reconfiguration looks like. We know it's zero sum according to Paul's post, but we don't know what is how he's going to measure it. We don't know if tiers are going to be around, and when we're talking about a combined group and solo queue, another thing that we don't know is whether there is going to be some kind of group calculation, because there isn't at the moment, right? At least not that we're aware of. That there's no kind of calculation of what the group threat is. Like, if you want to talk threat level or something like that, or even like an averaged out PSR for members of the group. There's no way to balance it. So you can have a group of cadets, which, welcome to the game, please stay and continue to play, but you run up against a group of 228 Blackwatch from my unit, or EMP or JGX or any one of those really high skilled competitive groups that are out there. That's a tough group to run up against. I mean, they're chill folks, are usually pretty cool, but at the same time, there's not a lot of forgiveness there. It's nobody's fault. It's just that's just the way the matchmaker works.
Yeah, and also I'm just kind of wondering too, is that, is it going to be the same problem where mainly if you have that, 4-man team who's very strong, but then you might get some other teammates who are just solo pugs who aren't very strong, are they going to be ranked up because they win?
That was the problem with the tier system, basically.
Yeah.
That's the current issue with the tier system.
Yeah, and mainly I want to know, is that going to change or is it not? Because I think that could be a factor, even still going forward.
So first things first, like we don't know all the ins and outs of the current tier system, but I'm just going to give my sort of understanding of the outline. It seems to me that the more stuff you do in a match, like if you lose a match but you get like 1,000 damage and a few kills, your skill rating will still go up. This is because like for every kill you get plus 10 points, and for losing you get minus 20, and it's just basically something like it looks at the match score. It's the simplest way to approximate it. So the better you do in every single match, the more skill rating you get. So if you win, a win, it's like they give you a fair amount of rating no matter how well you do. You might go into a match and just suicide and your team wins and your rating goes up. If you go into the match and lose but you perform well, your rating can still go up. So on average, this has meant the tier rate system is always just basically always trended upwards. As long as you're half decent, you're usually pulling your weight enough to keep the bar, you keep increasing your score. The way he phrases it, and now this is just my cynical side, he's talking about wins and losses and saying that you could still win when you lose. So they might very strongly weight whether you win and lose rather than just your individual performance. This means even if you perform really well and you lose, you will always go down. So I'm thinking the amount you gain by losing might be drastically increased. That would be the simplest solution from PGI's perspective, and that's usually sort of the route they take.
Do you think that would actually create a lot more salt, though, as far as like groups getting pissed off that most of the other 8 people don't really do much, and they're doing the most of the work, but they lose a game, and do you think that will increase the salt?
The simplest change will be upon at the end you see that upwards arrow, downwards arrow, or just equal sign, and if they make it you lose and you see the downwards arrow a lot more, it means if you're doing really well and you keep seeing the downwards arrow, it feels really disheartening, at least relatively speaking. It doesn't recognize your accolades. Whereas in the current system, if you perform really well and your team loses, you're like, oh, well, at least I didn't lose tier, at least I didn't go down. And that's just how it's been for years. And that will, at least impact slightly how people look at it in the future.
One thing to keep in mind, though, is that Mechwarrior Online is a team game, so you might have a really good individual performance, but it's the team that wins or loses. So if you lose, you lose. Now, I'm not saying that that it should only be marked on win-loss. There's certainly other aspects to Mechwarrior Online's score ranking system that I think would matter. But at the same time, you can have a fantastic match, but because you weren't playing with the team lost. I don't know if you should gain, right? Like that's the thing. I know there's a lot of discussion in the forums around, oh, well, if I perform well on a loss, I still want my PSR to go up. It's like, well, you performed well from your line of thinking, and maybe there are some stats to match it up, but maybe you were doing that performance at the cost of the rest of your team, in which case it's poor team play. So did you then play well? Probably not.
I mean, that's a good perspective, and that's healthy. Don't get me wrong, but reading some of the forum posts, especially on Reddit, and which I try to stay away from a lot, and reading the forum posts, it's that's not what I see, though, man. They get people get pissed that they do really well, and then most of the team are a bunch of slugs, basically. And I think,
absolutely.
I think that if this PR calculation of what Biter's talking about, or what we're talking about now, is that where you do good but your team loses and you still lose, that's going to create a lot more salt. Now, have they thought about Elio scores or something like that based off that? But that might be too hard for them to go ahead and calculate for doing matchmaking.
Whatever they have implemented with tiers right now, it's equivalent to an XP bar. It's some kind of number that they are working with. It's a computer. It's obviously going to have some number. What exactly you call it, I don't think matters too much, and I don't imagine they're going to do a huge retrofit. They're just going to change the values to make it so that it's more sensitive. Because as we said, right now, at least, as long as you're reasonably competent, most players will reach up into the upper tiers, and that's the biggest problem right now. Is that it's not punitive enough, and that's why I said the easiest way to make it more punitive is losses give you a greater minus score. And that way, if you have a group of 4 pros, as we were talking about, they will win. They'll never get a minus and they'll shoot upwards. Whereas if you have an average player, they're going to be winning half their matches or so. And therefore, they'll remain, so to speak, in tier 2, whereas the pros who never lose get shot all the way up to tier 1. And tier 1 actually means something because it's really hard to stay there.
Yeah. And one, just to kind of clarify a little bit, when we're looking at the behavior right now, where you have somebody on a losing team that performs really well, but the rest of the teams didn't, we're still dealing with the fact that right now we don't have a representation of true skill. Like what Biter mentioned, right? Like it's an XP bar. When you look at the trend line for something like tier 1, like tiers, it probably looks more like a hockey stick rather than a typical bell curve if you plotted it on a chart.
You
get people that are in, like, if you look at something like Jarl's list, you'll find people that are in like the 40th percentile that are in tier 1 because they've ground out so many games, so they kind of end up in an area where they don't belong. I don't belong in tier 1.
Same.
I
don't believe in tier 1 either.
Right? I'm really not a tier 1 pilot. Actually on a recent stream, I had a 4-hour lobby session with Jay-Z, a fellow 228 member. 4 hours of him literally destroying me, except for like 2 matches. I won 2 matches out of a whole bunch in private lobbies. And what I highlighted at the end of this is, like, according to the PSR, according to tiers, Jay-Z and I are on equal footing. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Someone like Jay is like super high skilled, very knowledgeable at the game. I'd like to think I'm better than average, but I'm not tier 1. I'm not. I have to be honest. And therein lies the problem with match quality. Is we have people in tiers getting matched against people that they shouldn't be matched with, at least not yet. We're kind of outside of the zone of proximal development.
Right now, as you mentioned, it's a kind of a hockey stick graph. So for the most part, the majority of players, if they played long enough, are at the end of the hockey stick. It's just a free-for-all. If you are a new player, tier 5s, the lower tiers do somewhat have some meaning. When I jump into a new account, the players are noticeably incompetent. Like, they've just picked it up, they're walking into walls, they really struggle to hide from LRMs, etc., etc. So, the tier system does work, but it only works to help the newest of players right now. And the biggest the thing is, just for people who've been playing this game for so many years, the majority of players are at the end of that hockey stick. They have maxed out their XP bar, and you just mashing all the various skill levels together means it's not doing its job as a tier system.
So I mean, personally, I think having a reset is good. If they go ahead and do it, I would like to see it, because I think we need to see those top tier players who should be in tier 1 be in that tier,
or whatever they call it, basically. So
whatever it's called next.
I mean, it looks like they're still calling it tiers in the post, right? Like just rereading Paul's response here again. They're saying that they are going back to tier 4. So from that, it looks like they're probably keeping the same thing. I would think that they would bring something like the Solaris Elo system over and reset it every year, because they have that system in place. That wouldn't be bad, actually. That would be a one way of doing it. And I know some people have kind of called for it, whether or not kind of it would be universally liked. I don't know.
I don't know.
So how does the Solaris ELO system work? I'm not too familiar with it right now.
So with Solaris, you start off at 1500 ELO, and then you will trend up or down based on your match performance, and it resets every 3 months. Now, I think resetting every 3 months in like quick play, I think would probably be a little bit too aggressive. To talk about a different game, a different style of game, Dota, which I actually have a lot of experience with, they have an MMR system that's they don't have tiers, they just have rankings. So your 1K player, which is pretty bad, 2K player is 3K player is decent, but they go all the way up to like the 9K. So they have this really wide spread, and that's how they place their players, and they reset it like every year.
Yeah.
And I think they have the K as well.
The thing just to mention, of course, comparing to any big popular game, is they have a large enough player base that every K worth of has a lot of players, and so they can make it very competitive. The issue MWO faces with a dwindling player base, or at least a fairly small one right now, is there's only so well you can matchmake it. Like, you can make it perfectly mathematically always the best games possible, but when you only have 24 players matching, there's only so well you can balance out the teams.
Oh, that's totally fair. I'm just more talking about as a kind of a represented example on a direction in which you could take it, right? You don't have to go like this really wide swath. You could certainly kind of narrow it down, but make it a little bit more fluid, so that way the matchmaker would have an easier time of just going by a matchmaking average as opposed to a tier number. Because that would end up with better quality matches.
So the thing with as we said, the current curve is a hockey stick, and it just really doesn't serve its purpose. The mountain is a really good system, but you need a lot of players to really differentiate the different parts of the mountain. All we're sort of asking for right now is that the end of the hockey stick to be brought back and to be normalized. Because I don't think there's enough players for us to spread them across several different tiers, but we want to sort of figure out who's at the upper ends and the bottom ends, and sort them accordingly.
Yeah, like PSR will with this whole reset, it should turn into more of a bell curve. Obviously, that's going to take. It's not going to happen right away. It's going to take a little bit of time for that to happen, right? But it should be really a bell curve, right? Where you have
the objective is a bell curve. Whether
the objective,
will deliver that is another matter.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
Okay,
so
what
basically,
to kind of visualize what Bio's been talking about, currently, as far as we are aware, all the tiers are kind of, there's no real percentage base. You can't really say where's the border between tier 4 and tier 5 and the percentage of population. If you go on Charles' list, you can't say, okay, the top 20% is tier 1 and the bottom 20% is tier 5. As far as we are aware, it's just an XP bar. It fills up, and eventually everyone's going to end up in tier 1. So ideally, what we're looking for is what the other guys call the bell curve, where you have a very distinct way to distribute your player base out. So you want a small amount of population in tier 1, you want an equally small amount of population in tier 5. The majority of your people should be in the middle ground, which would be tier 3, and then 4 and 2 as kind of the stepping stone to the other.
In your prior graph, it's almost a bit more extreme because we're talking a hockey kit. So the red bar is the majority of the population. There's only all the other colors are shoved down to the end. Like the vast majority are just red, and that's the problem. That everybody, no matter how skilled they are, however left or right you are on this graph, with the right being more skilled, let's just say, you are always matching up against each other. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
So the top
it looks
graph,
totally more like that.
Yeah, totally more like that. And the bottom graph is a lot more representative. Even if you have a smaller population and you can't always make sure that reds always face reds, it's 12v12 reds. The idea is that there's only 2 or 3 reds on each team. Whereas right now, everybody is seen as tier 1, or the vast majority is seen as tier 1. So it doesn't know who are those players who can just totally own matches on their own.
Yeah. And then even if you have this kind of fairly equal or ideal distribution, you still just want to go by tier and say, okay, tier 1 is tier 1. Because as we talked about earlier, tier 1 doesn't mean tier 1. There's no equal skill if you're both tier 1 necessarily. So ideally what you want your matchmaker to do is draw extra lines within the tier. So not just say, okay, I'm matching tier 1s versus tier 1s, but rather I'm looking at the number that's behind the tiers, which as far as we can tell, PSR could be a long floating number, and try to match that as close as possible.
So actually, it's a funny thing, at least, changing this curve from mostly everybody being red to it being more evenly spread about means you have to also change the matchmaker. Right now, the matchmaker very strongly wants to search from just the same tier or just 1 or 2 below, or at least, they usually change that strictness. So that will increase. If you change the distribution of tiers, you will change how long matchmaking will take. So they not only need to try and change the graph from the top one to the bottom one, they now need to change the matchmaker to fit the population size for that bottom population. Because if you're sort of if you're say tier 2, you can only take from your own tier 1 above, 1 below, but there's a lot of people still on tier 4 and tier 5, so to speak. And that means if there's a limited player base, you might have to be waiting much longer to find a game.
But like as right now though, that if it can't search for different types of people for the tiers, it just kind of adds everyone together though, right? Because I thought how the matchmaker works right now.
Over extended times, yeah, it will search across the tiers. There's also a question of, as I mentioned, balancing the tiers out. Right now, it finds players using tiers, but I'm not sure if it balances players for tiers. Right now, it primarily balances by weight class. So it looks around for enough players of the similar tier. So you're in tier 1. It's looking for enough tier 1 or tier 2 players. Once it finds enough, it just says, all right, 1 assault there, 1 assault there, 1 heavy there, 1 heavy there, and it just splits them by weight category. The thing is, it might just so happen all the tier 1s can carry in, I don't know, assault mechs, let's just say, and all the tier 2s are, just taking your run-of-the-mill heavy mechs. I'm not sure if that would, but the idea is just that that might actually work. But yeah, the point is that it just you might still get unbalanced tiers that it isn't balancing for skill on either side.
Okay.
Yeah, and they kind of with this graph up, you can kind of talk to it a little bit. Is they do kind of go, Paul did kind of push it towards tier balancing, and he's throwing numbers up here that have never until this whole test, I guess you could say, has come up. We really haven't seen numbers kind of presented aside from just tiers, but they're talking about a more granular tier PSR deviation. If you look on the right.
Yeah.
So there's another value that's hidden behind the scenes that they're looking at that we don't fully know what those numbers mean. Like what they're talking about deviation, but what's the actual number that they're marking that against, right? Like there's a lot of unknowns, and this is kind of,
it most likely means you sum the PSR on one side and the PSR of the other, and it's the difference.
Yeah,
that would be my guess. Yeah.
But since we have no idea how those numbers actually are measured, is it a number per tier? Is it one number that covers all the tiers and just makes cut at specific points? We just don't know.
It's all speculation at this point, though.
Yeah. We don't even know what the next number is. That would be the most interesting part, honestly.
And that's kind of like what some of the criticism has been. It's we're getting thrown kind of pieces of data, but we don't know what the backing data is. Like we don't know what they're actually looking at, and that makes it a challenge to be able to be able to analyze and really look at this data kind of objectively, right? We can only look at what they've told us.
Yeah.
But it would be good to see more on what they're actually doing and how they're calculating it and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of unknowns here, and there's a few people that have said that I've used certainly stronger words to that effect. I don't really want to get into that, but certainly that there's some concern that there's stuff from the equations that from these equations that we're missing, and it's hard for us to really decipher this.
Well, the PGI's been like that for a long time, though. Throughout the years, they pretty much hid all the information they could, basically about everything that they're doing. So until oh, hey guys, it's right here. Here you go. So they've been like that for years, and that's just how it works. Deal with the company, I guess.
Yeah. So going on from this, there's two questions at least. One is, how do you guys feel about the communication from PGI regarding what they've already done, mixing group queue with solo queue?
Let's do an out of 10 number for the communication regarding the queue merge.
Okay.
Out of 10. I'm going to say 6 out of 10. Mostly biased because of what they've been doing so far.
Okay, this is going to be a 1 out of 10 for communication, you're saying?
Yep. out of
For
10.
for
Just for communication.
communication, oh boy. I mean, communication's sake, I'm gonna get. I mean, 4.5.
Wow.
I'm going low on it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm about the same. I'm about the same the kind of the same metric for 3.5, 4.
Yeah.
They certainly tried, but there's a lot of information that they're just not sharing, which shouldn't be secret,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, I know.
yeah, because like I'm kind of in agreement where we kind of still need to get Bob and Biter's numbers there, but I mean just from my own voting, I would like to see concrete numbers, not just percentages. So that's where my bias comes in. So Bob, Biter, what do you say?
Well, basically, they've always been like the guys hiding in a cave somewhere, basically, and then they throw out a couple scraps so we can go ahead and look at. But as far as like overall, though, before like about a 3.54, this communication from Paul and everything else is a little bit better than what they normally have, and so I'll probably say about a 5. Basically, just still they need to improve. Basically that's one thing that PGI always had a problem with. They need to really improve that stuff. And all we do is kind of speculate different things, and then turns out everyone gets pissed off like later on.
All right. The tricky thing I have is just, what is the baseline? Like, are we comparing to prior PGI communication? Because often we'll just find out about things after they've already designed most of the systems.
Yeah, that's how I've come to my 6.
Yeah, that's why
I guess it would be kind of unfair to compare them to a more open company, because that just
like harebrained schemes.
Like for
Should just not,
PGI, like compared to usual PGI stuff and what they've been trying to implement, I'm quite pleased with the directions they're taking, and in some ways, like that's why I'm leaning towards like a 6 or a 7, though it is certainly got some flaws to it. So I think him actually showing the graphs and sort of all the little numbers here and there, explaining, oh, by the way, I've shuffled it this way. We can see stomps have changed by this month. They're actually giving us numbers, whereas before in the past they were mum about the numbers. They would just tell us, don't worry, there's plenty of players in the player base. Don't worry, there's plenty of people doing this game mode, and we would have absolutely nothing to go by. But if you do give us numbers, we still do sort of want to understand them. And it's also not just telling us the decisions they've already come up with. He's also saying, he made posts saying, oh, hey, we're considering merging the groups. I think just letting the community know about that ahead of time, and then actually doing like this 4-week-long thing and putting all this time into writing these long posts, that is a lot more effort than usual from PGI in attempts to reach out to the community. And that's the same for this PSR thing. They could have kept this, they could have kept mum about it and hidden it from the community, done it in secret, or just suddenly thrown it at us. Instead, he's like, we have this idea, here's kind of our rationale. What's your guys' thoughts? He says sort of at the end, we're looking for feedback. Them actually looking for feedback is a huge step up in terms of customer service, so to speak, particularly, after it's been on live support for so long. At least a game that's been on live support, suddenly getting all this attention, relatively speaking, it's like a 10 out of 10. But
relatively speaking, it's way more information than usual.
But
and I'm always going to be on the sense of getting feedback and always be a double-edged blade.
Yeah, because look at what happened with Faction Play last year. They asked for feedback, and
nothing happened.
And that happened, right?
Yeah, exactly. That was actually atrocious. And the changes they did to Faction Play as well, like they just deleted scouting, so I can't play Faction Play anymore. People wanted to be, people were loyalists to certain factions, but then they made it story based, so only 2 factions at that time were playing, and everybody lost their badges and everything. And it was just, it's another nightmare of implementation. Whereas this thing, the changes make sense, and the feedback. The streaking on forums can sometimes be a bit much, but they're a lot more common sense than they usually are. So yeah, that's why I have to lean towards 6 or a 7. It could always be better. But in some ways, just to play devil's advocate, you don't always want to give too much information to the audience, because then they start imagining themselves as wannabe game designers, and they start imagining really complicated solutions that
they can't do.
PGI just won't be prepared to implement.
I feel like they've already done that already in the forums.
Oh, all the time. Like
every time.
there's posts from 2015 that talk about the PSR reset and recalculation and all that kind of stuff. Like that kind of stuff has been present in the game for a long time. You know, I'm you know, I'll you know, separate myself maybe from the kind of my fellows on the comp community side, in that I'm a big believer in that, you know, a game developer needs to develop their game the way that they want to develop their game. And they can certainly take feedback from the community and make improvements to those to their game. And it's up to them to choose the feedback that's implemented in the game. But at the end of the day, it's still their game to develop. Now, they would be well served to listen to their community and to seriously consider some of the changes that they've made. We have some very intelligent people that have cut the game apart, offer very good suggestions on how to improve the game over the years. And if they kind of listen to them, and that's across the board, right? Whether it's competitive or casual players or high skill low player, however you want to delineate the player base. I'm happy saying competitive and casual, because I don't like the thought of calling somebody a low skilled player, because that's just that's not helpful, right?
No.
But you know, everybody's offered kind of, you know, decent suggestions. Sometimes they clash with each other, but Piranha Games should listen and should really kind of, you know, listen to what the community is saying. Even in the feedback forum for this post that you have up right now, you've got like you know, so I'll throw a garbage stat out there just because I've scrolled through the forums and I've read it. You know, you're looking at what, like a 98% return on people saying, yeah, do this.
Yeah, I mean, it's been very positive from both. Well, not both, but like every spectrum of player base they want to see this.
Yeah, because the problem we've had in the past with listening is just sort of along the lines of escort, whereupon it's not very much a liked mode for quite some time, and they just are not aware of it until Russ says in a live stream, "Oh yeah, we came up with that new awesome game though that everybody loved," and then the chat explodes. And he's like, "Oh wait," and that was the only time when
that was a beautiful moment.
That was good.
Yeah, it was good, but obviously it would have been way better if they at least had a pulse on the community's feelings about escort, such that it didn't have to turn into that big explosion, because that is sort of, you know, we want the game to be pushed in generally the right direction. It doesn't matter exactly what happens, but as long as you're going the right path, we can be happy. And the problem is they are sometimes blind to things like escort until suddenly the community yells in their faces.
They certainly tend to do things that the whole community rallies behind, and even something as innocuous as bringing like a true color pink in the game. It was either Paul or Russ said that, hey, if you get a landslide of people that want it, we'll bring it in. Like, it seems that they want to make non-controversial changes that the whole community will say sure. Whereas ones that are risky, right, like combining group and solo queue, hey, that's actually a risky move, right? You know, even doing like the 8v8 test, that was a risky move, but that was a fun risky move. And I really wish that they would reconsider. It's too late now, but I wish they would have reconsidered 8v8 with solo opt-in, because that would have kept the group queue separate and would have given people that don't necessarily like running into pre-mades a way out of running into those pre-mates, right? One of the criticisms of combined queues, just to go back to that for a moment, is when you're in a group, right? You know you're going to run into groups of you have casual folks, you're going to run into groups of comp folks, and you know going into that. And you also know that, hey, if I don't want to run into these people anymore, I can just leave the group, right, and go into solo queue and drop in solo queue, sync drop on with your stream or with folks in Discord or what have you. Whereas now you don't have the ability to really escape that. Where can you go? Faction play? No, that's even worse.
It's even worse.
That's it from a pre-mating competitive standpoint, right? Some people bring up the comp queue button. Well, the comp queue button is only there for worlds or some kind of competitive event. It's not there all year. So comp queue is just not there. And even if it is there, there's not enough people to be able to have an active comp queue 24/7. So then you've got one segment of the community that we're saying, okay, you can't play in solo queue because you're too good. You have to play in comp queue, right? So group queue and solo queue provided a kind of a soft delineation between, in some respects, the kind of the difference in skill, because
or at least organized and disorganized.
Yeah, that's fair. That's because at the end of the day, what everybody wants to do in this game, regardless of your skill level, regardless of how you look at the game from a playstyle perspective, is people want to play the game and people want to be able to play the game with their friends.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody does that, right? And how can we achieve that so that way we're not leaving anybody out in the cold?
Now, my mindset, at least response to this would be, at least these points, would that be, with the dwindling player base, we can't keep doing the separate buckets. And whilst it's nice to be able to click a button and go to a different experience, and that totally would be great, there just isn't enough players to have the separate queues so much anymore. With that being the case, are there ways still to try and make sure that players are matched out equally according to skill? And I think PGI is right on the money with trying to change the PSR system, and the community as well. Of course, they were been advocating for this forever.
Yeah, definitely.
That this, particularly with dwindling queues, you can't choose different queues anymore. Or at least we run into the issue that queue times just go up and up and up and up as the player base gets smaller and smaller. So, with that being the case, instead, having a proper bell curve rather than a hockey stick makes a lot more sense. That way, if you're a casual player, you're typically going to be matched up against other casual players. And even though you sadly don't have the option to queue for it, thankfully, the button you press right now will bring you to that, the experience that's appropriate to your skill level.
Yeah.
I got a question. What do you guys think? Basically, obviously we've been playing the game for years. 2013, I think, when the game came out and everything. What do you think is the major thing that actually started the I guess apocalypse of people actually running from Mechwarrior Online, basically, as far as they're doing
mass exodus?
Well, yeah, mass exodus, or whatever it's called, basically, whatever you want to call it.
I would say a big chunk was when the skill tree came into play.
That's skill tree,
probably the biggest
engine desync.
Yeah, that's it.
Engine desync. Okay.
Yeah, there was. I think there was like there's a few kind of milestones, right? You get mech rescale, which push people away. Then you had the skill maze and engine desync, which frustrated a lot of people because now their favorite mechs were kind of useless, right? The Kodiak turns like a barn, it's a bloody barn door, and then we got to the point of no development. Because of Mechwarrior 5. And granted, I don't necessarily fault them for wanting to put their resources into a new game, but they should have maintained their live service better.
Yeah.
And PSR is the overarching thing on everything. It's match quality. Match quality has been a problem for a long time.
Yeah, I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I think there's plenty we see within the community that can give us little speed bumps and things that we can point to. But if I look at the Steam charts ever since it started, whilst it goes up and down a lot here and there, and those certainly are tied to certain events, it predominantly is just a steady decline over time. Like even if they were doing a pretty good down job, and there weren't anything that was controversial, I just think, the game is getting long in the tooth, and people have had their fair share of it. They've said, you know what, I played 5,000 hours of MWO and I've had everything it can experience. There's only so long any online service game can give you until you've had your fill of that kind of content and you feel like you want to go on to something else. So I think it's just age is the biggest thing as well.
Yeah, because I think that's actually a point we've touched on in the past where, for a game that's been going on since 2013, this is actually a pretty long run considering other games of the same age. And it is one of those things where because Mechwarrior Online, it doesn't have that story element. It's mostly being held together by the player base against the PvP aspect. And whenever you've had the same maps, the same players, and the same matches over and over again, how much more can you change and how much more can you develop to keep it fresh?
Well, especially with the engine that they're using as well, too. You can't really modify a lot of things.
Well, MWO always almost devolves into skirmish. 12v12, just kill
That's been a thing.
And the thing is, they've tried branching out. They tried making like Solaris. The whole point of that is obviously let's try and make something completely different, give a new zest of life to the game. And that makes complete sense. But I really don't think there's many people playing Solaris right now. It's not the mainstay of MWO anymore.
Well, I mean, that's been one of the things too, is that mainly, is that I brought up my opinions of Solaris. I really enjoy the mode of Solaris. I thought it was a lot of fun. I still enjoy it, but the problem is that when you have a player base that is dwindling and you add in different play areas, which have quick play, group drops,
a new bucket.
New bucket,
14 buckets.
But the player base is dwindling.
Buckets.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, working buckets. But the thing is, you're adding more game modes, but the player base is dwindling, and then at that point, you can't use any game mode because everyone's being spread to different areas.
Yeah, the hope as a business plan would be that Solaris becomes like a new. It's like a new game. Like you just launched it you find a core player base who really loves Solaris, and there's a lot of cross pollination.
Yeah.
But in the end, I think, as far as I can tell, that hasn't happened. So they put a lot of work into Solaris, and it was the right idea because it's like, there's only so much we can do on Skirmish. Let's do something else. They tried something else, and people said, I just want to play Skirmish.
They put the resources towards that game mode, and when they should actually put it into quick play, which is what everyone does. Everybody plays quick play, no matter what. If you're alone, if you got friends, you can basically go sync drop, do whatever you got to do, and then there's also like group queue as well. So they should have actually put more resources into maps, into game modes, into different mechs probably, or just whatever, basically, instead of actually spinning. I like the concept, I like the idea. It's lore, as you know, I love lore, but that should have been it.
Yeah, the fundamental point
exactly.
The reason Solaris is such a great case study is that for the most part, when you ask people about Solaris, they aren't saying, "Oh, it was a terrible mode. There were so many flaws. It was terrible."
Yeah.
It's just they will say, "Oh yeah, it was kind of neat. I just don't play it."
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's just because in the end, if they could try something different, it just doesn't work, and in the end, people go back to Skirmish. But there's only so much to Skirmish, and in the end, you just get bored of Skirmish, and that's why we see the general downturn trend.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
And that's something.
They need to.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I was gonna say like this is the reason why they gave up with paid content with the Dervish being the last kind of mech, right? And that was over a year ago now. But they also gave up just on providing the content to keep the game alive. Like Bob, what you're saying is, let's where are the maps, right? Like new maps, new game modes, tweaking game modes, tweaking spawns, something to kind of breathe new life into the game. And in fairness, right? I think that's part of the purpose of merging these queues, right, is to try to breathe a little bit of new life in the game, try to keep players, player base that's left, keep them playing, and I don't mean this in an underhanded way, but capitalizing on the fact that a lot of people are having to stay at home right now because of the current kind of global pandemic, and we've seen an uptick in people that are playing as a result. So it's like, hey, there's some renewed interest. Let's maybe see if we can capitalize on it and get people playing again. I hope it culminates into something more. I really do. I love playing the game too much.
I think let's just painting it from PGI's perspective. They obviously put all hands on deck with Mechwarrior 5. Makes complete sense, at least for a small studio. Even sending one person away is, however, like a 20th of your personnel not working on your main production, and you need everyone, because they even delayed several times with MW5. With that being said, they're like, okay, we're done with MW5, we're going to start moving towards DLC, and we'll start looking at MWO. And their first thoughts were, all right, matchmaking's taking forever, let's fix that. I think that actually makes sense. And next they're saying, all right, people are saying they actually listen to the community talking about PSR, saying the best of the best are mixed with average Joes. So that's the next step they're going into. So I think those first two steps are the most bang for your buck and make the most sense for the longevity of this game. After you have sorted those things out, Bob, you were talking about game modes and maps and stuff. I think those are quite, like making a map takes a lot of effort and stuff, like a lot of time with the designers and teams. The simplest bang for your buck, at least for keeping the lights on with the least amount of effort is just game balance. I would say, this is what they were doing for quite some time, was just going in and fiddling with some numbers. They're saying, oh, we think narcs are too powerful. Let's just double the cooldown for some annoying reason. Let's just give this mega heat scale. Yes.
LRMs need to go faster and hit harder and all those sorts of things.
Yeah. But the
Apocalypse.
I love the example of the heat scale limit quirk that they put into the game. There were mechs which in lore have weapon systems that can't be fired in Mechwarrior Online because of ghost heat. And they're like, well, this mech isn't doing too well anyway, so you know what? Let's just give it a heat scale limit quirk so it can, like an awesome, can fire lots of PPCs at once. I don't see awesomes dominating everywhere, but it means the awesome's has a unique flavor to it. I really like that. You could fire a whole bunch of PPCs with it, like 3 heavy PPCs at once. Just no other mech can really do that. I want to see more stuff like that. Underperforming mechs just given little tweaks to make them better, and just mixing things about so that every month they come back, there's something slightly different in the game. And for PGI's part, all they need to do is fiddle with some spreadsheet numbers, just like they already have been doing for quite some time.
Yeah. At the same time, though, I personally don't think that would be enough. I brought up I was trying to compare stats with a popular game like Dota. Obviously, no, Mechwarrior is just a flat line. So for that. But what you can clearly see, popular games don't have a consistently high player base. They go up and down, and by a lot. And if you look at games like Dota, Hearthstone, League of Legends, all those big names that have been consistent for years, what they're doing is every few months, at very least once a year, they're implementing something that really changes how the game is played, and that's how you keep a game fresh.
So
and that's something
that scale there is daily, and so it just depends how many people are actually.
Yeah, you want to do by
which people have free time.
Yeah,
damn it.
And also, it might be good to find. It might be good to find a game that's more similar to Mechwarrior Online. So there are like any other, just shooter games that have no story.
Well, any other
World of Tanks?
Multiplayer games have been going for that long.
Yeah, like World of Tanks, basically.
World of Tanks, Warframe, other ones have been around for a while.
Yeah.
We need to find one. Is World of Tanks on Steam? No, that's something else.
Yeah, that's Blitz actually. So yeah, go check out Dota too as well.
Yeah, and I mean Russ regularly references World of Tanks, so it's actually it's almost like that's kind of his bellwether is World of Tanks.
Yeah,
and World of Warships.
Yeah, World of Warships as well,
or World of Warships. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, the game is actually kind of like World of Tanks, to tell you the truth. About 12. Well, that's 15 versus 15. This is 12 versus 12. You fight each other on these different maps, and you get your scores. And this game's pretty much wow. Oh boy.
Oh wow, they had a really big jump.
Yeah, that was when they didn't they bring out like submarines lately.
Just very recently.
Yeah. So not that I follow it, but they brought out submarines. They brought out something fresh, just what Ian's talking about. So they brought. In order to get the game fresh, new, exciting, you have to have change. You have to have something going on, and I think that's what Rush is trying to do now with the scores, the PSR scores, merging the queues, doing certain things. But it needs more. The dwindling player bases just keep on. It's dwindling, going down.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Just question of whether you're putting more money into a sinking ship.
True.
Ultimate sad conclusion with Solaris is that they tried something really different. It wasn't bad. It just didn't really captivate people. And there's only so much you can do with MWO. My suggestions, just to reiterate, was just that they needed to do some big changes and code changes. So that's why they merged the queues, and that's why they're trying to change the PSR system. For me, that makes the most sense to make sure the lights stay on for the next few years. And my suggestion about just changing values of mechs and just doing game balance stuff is just the cheapest way to keep the lights on and to keep people playing, and at least from PGI's perspective, paying for MC or mech packs. Because right now, at least, the issue is that there are no changes whatsoever to the game. All the mechs that are in their finished states. They're never going to change. It's boring, it's static, it's stale. But if just every month there's a new hate skill limit quirk or some changes to a certain mech, like the Kodiak gets its agility back, and they say, hey, let's just give its agility back, see how things go. People like that gives you a reason to come back to the game. And to give the Kodiak its agility back is a few numbers changed in the spreadsheet. It doesn't take much time.
Or also one other thing, quad mechs.
Oh God.
That goes into the category of a lot of money and time.
I know.
and engine. But one of the things I want to kind of at least point out, I mean, we don't have to spend a lot of time talking about it, but when they moved Group Q from 12v12 to 8v8, and it was done on the backing of a tweet on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
Right. It was just oh, by the way, Group Q is 8v8 now. What that demonstrates is how much power PGI has over the game without actually having to bring it down. So that opens up an avenue for things like a special event queue, right? You know, you're talking World of Warships. I play World of Warships on occasion, and they do these special events with, you know, special ships and all that kind of stuff. You know, they could adopt something similar, right? They could bring like escort back as a special event, or scouting back as a special kind of time limit event. You know something, right? Something.
You guys have been particularly mean to me in the forums. Have escort back.
No. But no. I mean it
know.
as a special event, and
yeah.
You know, something that injects some life and you know, and other things, right? Like those escort
is
and scouting things.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Escort is back, but you get 10 times the sea bills.
Right.
There's a lot of opportunity there for them to, you know, inject some life by providing live content to a live service, and therefore, you know, have player retention and bring interest back, because now it's not the same slugfest of skirmish no matter what that happens in the queues right now.
Yeah, and it's something we've kind of talked about earlier, where I compared it to the random play modes that League of Legends has that are circling every few weeks. And like just something crazy, like it's a special queue and all your lasers have random colors. I think that's one of my personal favorite suggestions. Don't even change the gameplay, just random colors for, like, let's say 1 week you have this extra queue, all the lasers are randomized. Or even better, all the weapons have randomized sound effects. Just something stupid.
Well,
something
I think
rocket minimum range has been this week. Rocket minimum range has been removed. Have fun.
Yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't change colors or that kind of thing, because those can be easily modified, you know, by the player base already. Because actually, I already have a color mod that changes the heavy laser colors, so that's something that probably wouldn't work too well. But I think if you're to change, like, you know, mech stats for like a weekend. You know, no armor. Bring back the crazy cooldowns of Lerm or something stupid for like a weekend.
They used to do that, actually. They used to have streams with like Tina, and basically get a bunch of people together, and no gravity. So basically, if you jump, you're just jumping up. You know, basically type thing. You know, just whatever, something crazy, something
Slow
bring it in.
mode.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, we already have, you know, every weekend there's an event, or every 2 weekends we already have an event, but it's pretty much the same event every weekend. Just labeled differently.
It's, you know, the same gameplay all the time.
Yeah,
it's
mix
just
it
getting
up.
rewards.
Go wild.
Yeah. Well, the problem with
Not
events
too
has
wild.
been it's funny actually, because we've had events, you know, where it said, oh, you know, do enough damage with Daka or every single ballistic weapon, and those were torture sometimes, because particularly when they said, oh, get enough damage or KMDDs with missile weapons, and people just took loads of Lerm
and things like UAVs down, so Bob can get salty down the corner.
Yeah,
I hate that event, by the way. I freaking despise that thing. Every single time I see that thing, I yell at the wall. I yell at the clouds. Damn you!
Old man yell at the clouds.
Old man yell at the clouds. Yeah.
I think first things first is, I think we want to make sure matchmaking, you know, the mixed queue thing makes sense and it's properly implemented, and also after that PSR that's properly implemented. Those are the biggest, most impactful changes they should focus on right now. Reduce matchmaking time, increase matchmaking quality. After that, the cheap, simple answer is you just need to put a little bit more life into the game, actually changing the sandbox, how it plays, because we've been playing the same thing for months.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, the path forward for Mechwarrior Online at this point is pretty straightforward. Fix the game to the point that everyone who still plays it enjoys it, or at least most people. There's never going to be
everyone's not going to enjoy it, but
enjoys it. Yeah. And then you need to do something new. And those are the two steps that have to happen if the game is going to survive. as more than just a niche game with like 100 players on Friday and nothing more.
Aliens.
Yeah.
That's what they need.
Well, it's just to help keep the lights on,
Yeah.
and all you need to do is change a few spreadsheet values, at least,
Okay.
Yeah.
here and there. All right.
Bring in the bird aliens.
Aliens, yes. The bird aliens
All
come
right.
in.
A while ago, I did ask, number one was how they communicated about the changes they have implemented. How do you feel about how they should communicate about the changes that are to come? What would you guys want to see? How do you want to see them communicate about the PSR changes?
How do we want them? Just to tell us, man. Like instead of just bringing
More
up
data.
Yeah,
More
more
data.
data, man. More data.
Would it
More
would it
data and
be
more often.
would
That's
it
the
be
most part for me.
beneficial on their end to not as much do a forum, but like do like a live stream to show what could be changed or what they are changing?
I think the problem with BGI is they can put their foot in their mouth when they talk
Yeah.
live.
True. Well,
Russ
maybe
did that a couple
maybe not
times.
keep Russ in there, but put like some devs in there because Russ
What-
is usually the one that puts the foot in their
Don't
mouth.
do it live. I think that's the
Even
most
with
important
Paul
part.
and the
Don't do it
others.
live.
Yeah.
No, even with the with Paul and the others, they get really tired of answering the same questions over and over and over again. People sort of saying, "Oh, after you implemented engine desync, the agility of my mech changed," and they're like,
Well, don't put chat.
"No."
Well, don't put the chat in there. Just do a live stream with no chat.
I think for Paul's talents and whatnot, it's way better. He sits down, he takes the time to write down a post that he's happy with, and releases it to the forums where he's just giving his take,
Yeah.
rather than him possibly having a chat he has to ignore or something he has to say live where he might put his foot in his mouth.
Yeah, and also,
yeah.
Lars, what you also need to consider if you're doing something like showing what you can do, chances are really good you're gonna show your tools that you're using for it, and there's a crap ton of licensing stuff that's going into those tools. So
All right.
that might not be the best idea.
Yeah, and one of the things that I wish that they would do, and this probably might not really answer your question, but it might answer your question as well.
It's a starter.
Is so one of the things that they have, and it's not very well known, but it's something that Jarl's List uses, is an API, right? To be able to scrape and be able to have more of that data available. I go back to Dota because it's just a game that I know that has a lot of these things in place. But Dota actually exposes a lot. Like you can pull all of your match history. You can pull what the kind of what the graph was for what your kind of team poll was based on economy and all that kind of stuff on third-party websites. So you go to look at a site like Dota Buff and look at your matches and see everything. I would love to be able to see something like that for MWO. Now they started. It was like a pet project for one of the original devs in the game. I know if you go through some of the Necrode posts in the MWO forums, you'll see a big discussion about API. But then development on that stopped. So now and this kind of leads into the discussion about we need more data when they can actually just expose the data to the API and be like, here you go, scrape the data that you need and be done with it. And I think that would be a fantastic way forward for them to be a little bit more for them to be forthcoming with information, but without having to have some kind of special announcement for it. Is just improve or fix or finish their API.
Yeah. All right. To give sort of my answer to my own question a little, I would sort of to round up I don't think necessarily I want to hear things about APIs, because in the end, the purpose of the PSR changes is to increase match quality. And there's a lot of work put in just to help the most dedicated of the community to find data about the game. What they need to do is just simply implement something that is effective. As part of that, at least communication with the public. I think there's a few simple touchstones you could show, which would be the distribution of tiers. How many people are in tier 1, of active players in the last month, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, etc. And every month or so, because it will take a while for tiers, particularly after the reset, to spread out, is you want to show how the distribution has gone, and you want to explain how you want the distribution to be. Because I'm thinking they should just show a bell curve and say, here's what we're kind of looking for, and currently this is the curve we've got. And he does all the fiddling with the numbers. He doesn't need to tell us all the numbers, but he just tells us this is how I want the curve to be shaped. And the other crucial thing I want to hear from them is not just player skill ratings, but how the matchmaker uses player skill rating. Just the basic outline of how does it try and balance, how does it balance it, and how are we going to change the balance with the bell curve rather than the hockey stick. Those are the basic keystones I just want to sort of hear, and I don't, it would be great to hear particular details and all the extra stuff, but just the same as these posts, just I want to hear, once every month for the next couple of months, how it's panning out.
Yeah, just some different types of communication. I know, like a World of Tanks does that, and I like looking at my stats. I've been playing World of Tanks for a long time, and just look at like how many guys I killed, what what things, how much damage I took, like whatever. It has a really good system for that. And then I could also take apps to go look at my stats while I'm at work, just fiddling around, and that's really cool. I like doing it, and that would actually be a big improvement for what NuttyRat is saying. A big improvement, that would just make me happy, make a lot of people happy that are like concerned about stats, to go ahead and look at those kind of things and figure out how they're doing over time, against who, what mechs, like what mechs they're better at, like all that kind of stuff. They have something like on the website. Yeah, they have something on the website, but it's not like as detailed as World Tanks is. So, something that'd be kind of cool if they did that, to go ahead and help communication wise, at least a minimum, to go and do that kind of stuff. But
I mean, one simple thing change is everyone has an individualized list of all how they're doing with all the different mechs. Your kill death, win loss with your mechs, your average match score with mechs. But the only way to see it is some obscure thing through your profile on the website, and you have to be logged in to see only your stats. It would be so amazing if they just open that up to some API to the public. It's already available. The numbers are already recorded. If everyone is able to see that, we could see which mechs are really struggling overall, or at least give an idea. It would be really interesting for the math whiz.
Okay, so let's do a wrap up as far as scores, like different things that are happening for the merge and all that kind of stuff. I think Ian is the score master there, right? Ian, you're the score master?
Oh, Ian?
Okay, yes, go ahead. So, Nutty, for your information, we started, when we first heard about the change, we tried to rank it out of 10, what we thought, just to quickly summarize at the end what we thought about the change. And we started out with a fair 6.7 out of 10, fairly optimistic. And then surprisingly, at least for me, our opinion went down. And I think last week we had a 6.1 out of 10. So,
and this is to how we rate the merging of the groups out of 10.
Yeah, for the group merge. Yeah. So maybe let's go once more. I'm gonna calculate it again as everyone gives their final score, and then we might be able to spend another 5 minutes or so talking about why it changed in the way that it did. So, final score. Better go.
All right. So historically, through the previous weeks, I've said that as a solo experience, I gave it a 4 out of 10, and as a group experience, a 6 out of 10. The reasoning being that group queue, you could play with your friends again at any sort of time without having to queue for a very long amount of time, often without having to be queued up against a group of pros, which is the problem we had with 8v8s and 12v12s. Whilst it has improved it for groups, there are still some sort of issues, at least that the groups often feel like they have to maximize their tonnage and everyone's dropping really heavy. But the thing is, actually, technically, you don't. And the min-max values of tonnage are actually sort of misleading in a way, like with how the matchmaker is currently working. And that assumption is also being carried over to the solo queuers, who are often also dropping extremely heavy. Solo queue has lost a lot of its structure that was present before the merging. It had a very different flavor than group queue, where lances were separated by their tonnage type, their weight category. And it was fairly much more regimented in the sense of where you spawned. Now it's a bit of a humdrum mess, and everybody is dropping a much heavier mechs. And this means a lot of very heavy mechs are dropping in the light mech spawns, which are often the light mech spawns because they were really bad places to start if you go 50 kph. So as a solo queuer, I gave it a 4 out of 10 because their experience has gone down as a consequence, and it wasn't a consequence of being stomped. It was a consequence of the structure that was really enjoyable with solo queue being eroded. Over time, at least over the last couple of weeks, my opinion has slightly improved in the sense that tonnages have started to lighten up. So it isn't so much what I called turret warrior online, with all the heaviest mechs just all, exchanging fire, from their fixed positions. It was so static and boring, and it's not what I play the game for. So I don't know. I think I'm going to slightly improve it. So a 5 out of 10 for solo queue. It's lost its structure, but in the end, at least it keeps the game alive. But it's not good for solo queuers. And for group queue, it's up to a 7 out of 10. People still have the issue of trying to fill out the tonnage, but things have quieted down. At least for us, when we're playing casually, we're still able to find a lot of very casual games, and things have quieted down after the first week. And so the experience is slightly better, but I still, for me, the game feels radically different and is not fitting my more harassment style. So that gives an average 5 and a 7, a 6 out of 10.
Indeed, that's a long-winded way to say 6 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I guess we're going backwards, so I guess I'll go next.
Yeah.
Good.
I would have to say solo queue, just like what Byron was saying, probably about a 5 out of 10 to tell you the truth. It's good. It's not bad. The issue I do see, I saw a lot of different types of stomps and everything else. But of course, like I only played several. I think ever since it's probably about 30 games, like somewhere around there. But as far as group queue, it's been great, to tell you the truth. Actually hanging with you guys, kind of just having fun. I'm not getting the we're fighting 228, basically like all the time, since that's the only group that's actually playing on group queue from before. That's the only group that's playing. So like we get stomped like constantly, and then it gets us, it definitely gets disheartening like after a while. Even though like I really don't care about losing, it doesn't bother me. But it's like after like 20 times, you're like, okay, I'm done. Basically, I'm gonna go play something else type of thing. But I do feel that change is good. It's always it's good or bad. Change is always good for a game type system. You have to have this, and with this being with everyone left with the lights on, when they went to Mechwarrior 5, it kind of decreased the population, and so they needed something to go bring this up. As far as group queue, I'll probably say about a 6 out of 10. It's good. It's improving. Communication's kind of not that good, but it's there. Basically, like I'm excited. When I do play now, it's like, okay, cool, I'm gonna go play some Mechwarrior online. But I do see some problems, like the group queue. I have been watching a lot of streamers. They can't become like all the really top guys. They can't do their favorite mechs like someone wants to do a light mech, because they have to drop in heavies just to actually start getting the wins. Because once you drop in light mechs, you're fighting other guys that are only doing like assault mechs. And the tonnage probably has to be tweaked a little bit. Things have to be tweaked and stuff like that. But they can have fun doing what they're doing, playing light mechs or medium mechs or what have you. So, overall, probably about a 6 out of 10 for group and 5 out of solo. That's me.
Okay.
All right.
5.5. Nutty.
So solo queue, or solo queue. So as queuing as a solo player, I will say 4 out of 10. And I kind of, just to kind of sum up some of the things that I touched on kind of earlier, is as a solo player, you're kind of more of a hanger on for the group, right? Like you've got a group that typically they are on some kind of comms, they're on Discord or TeamSpeak or what have you, and they've coordinated their mechs, or typically the groups that I end up running with, they're coordinating their mechs, their play styles, all that kind of stuff. And as a solo player, you can't really link up with them because you don't know who you're going to be playing up against. So you end up as a bullet sponge. You're kind of at the mercy of that group. So if you're with a good group, yeah, you're going to do well. If you're with a bad group, you're not going to do so well, right? The group controls the match now, regardless, right? Whether it's whether it's 4 people, or if it's 2 people groups, or a 2 and a 3, which we have seen out there in the world. So solo queue is certainly a lot more challenging. Going over to group queue, group queue I rated a little bit higher, but still quite low, 5 out of 10. And this has to do with the things that I talked about before, right? About about the disparity. You're in a bad group, you're going to do your whole team is very likely to do bad. If you're in a good group, your team is very likely to do good. Now, I've been kind of lucky in that I tend to group up with players that are kind of higher up in kind of the skill ranking, so I tend to do well in groups. But when you look at like the super high skilled players and what their reaction is that these super high skilled players, they saw their stomps go up incredibly, right? So if you look at the match quality for them, the match quality has gone down. They don't want to stomp, right? They actually find it not very satisfying to sit there and win 12-0 and 12-3 or anything like that. They want to have competitive matches. And while it certainly has been competitive for those of us kind of in the average kind of skill ranking or skill playability, for them it's become a lot easier. Some of these folks have kind of commented that their win-loss has gone up considerably, and they don't want that. They really don't want that. They want to fight. Like they want to have to really test themselves in a match. And so for them, that match quality has gone down significantly. And so it's really kind of screwed up groups a little bit, and has brought a lot of control to drops based on when you're dropping against a very strong group.
Okay.
Yeah.
Marsh.
Go ahead, Marsh.
Okay. So I would say if we're gonna branch out into solo and group, solo drops. I mean, I think because I'm now the fourth person to do my own ranking here, I'm kind of a lot in agreement with what was already said, so I'm not going to go fully in depth on my reasoning for it, because like I agree with a lot that was just said here from Bob, Biter, and Nutty. As a solo dropper, it's one of those things where I do agree that you are just kind of along for the ride a little bit. Even though I know whenever I solo drop, I tend to try to, use comms a lot. Be it granted, like I know the group that be it 4-man, 3-man, whatever is out there, they probably have their own Discord or TeamSpeak. I still try to be out there giving some targeting, talking to the group. So I try to make it my own game in a sense, for whatever it is. And I still try to enjoy it to the best that I can. But yeah, I would say probably I'm going to put myself at like a 6 for solo. There are still some things that need to be improved in terms of tonnage and that kind of thing. Especially then I would go on for groups. We played last night for about 3 hours. As a group, we had about 3 to 4 people, for the most part. And, I think playing with friends, it is a lot of fun. But I think there's that issue of you feel like you need to take a certain amount of tonnage, because it feels like if you go in a group and you don't fill up that tonnage, you're almost discounting the team if you are not bringing that tonnage. And for certain players, they might not feel comfortable taking a heavy or assault. I'm mostly a medium light mech pilot, but I think last night I barely took out a light or a medium because I felt like I was more inclined to fill up that tonnage, to soak up that team damage for people. So I would say, if going forward, is that if we do go ahead and reset the PSR, we begin to look at tiers. With that in mind, I put myself at about like a 6.5, 7 overall. Wow. Is that this is going to be, looking forward is that if we do a PSR reset and we get people to where they should be, I'm going to be optimistic that they do it. Knock on some sort of wood that they do it right. So put myself at a 7. That's where I stand.
Okay.
All right. And then for me, when I play solo drops, I usually take that flanker role, so I don't really participate in a team. I just try to do my best and usually take out 1 or 2 people and therefore contribute. So for me, the change hasn't really changed how solo drops pan out. And And all I'm trying to say with this is I'm going to focus my rating on the group queue change, which is going to get a 7 out of 10 from me. Obviously, as all of you guys have talked about a lot, there are a lot of things that aren't great and that still need to improve. But the main takeaway for me is it's been fun playing with friends, and it's been crazy fun seeing a lot of guys that I haven't seen in 4 or 5 years come back to the game. I'm not going to say they all just came back because of this change, but it certainly feels like this change has brought back some of my really, really old friends. And yeah, it's been so much fun hanging out with them that I can't give it a negative rating. So 7 out of 10 for me.
Okay, yeah. And then also I forgot to mention too is that I think one other thing that also needs to change is if you're in a group, you drop an Alpha Lance. You know, I think that's my main drawback is that whenever, for instance, like kind of go along the same lines, I was taking out heavies and assaults, but I would drop on Canyon Network, and you drop in that one area of Canyon in an assault, and then you got to like really trudge around that hillside to get where you need to be.
Yeah.
We also, just as a little aside, we finally got some proof about the 2-man, 3-man thing, because we had heard about that, but we personally hadn't actually proved it ourselves. We saw it last night, and Lars was in a 2-man, and he would often actually happen to be in the Bravo Lance because the 3-man was put into Alpha, and the 2-man was put into Bravo Lance.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that brings the total rating to a 5.9 average. And yeah, basically our average rating has been going down every single week.
Wow.
And I feel like that's kind of because initially we were a bit overly optimistic, as we usually are on this podcast. But also I think one of the main points why I have brought my rating down a fair bit over the weeks is the subpar communication. And that's one of my takeaways why I rate this change lower now than I did initially.
Yeah, because
it
we're
sort
optimistic.
of feels, in the end, a lot of the ways the game is sort of mostly the same. Just now you can sort of play with friends, and that's a good change. But there's a lot that could have been done that they haven't.
Yeah.
Missed potential.
I think as an outsider looking in, right? Like I saw a lot of the kind of the conversations that you guys were having, or something, sorry, that Lars that you were having and Bob that you were having about this change at the beginning, right? Where there was a lot of excitement, and for good reason, right? It's good to see a change in the game. However, I think part of this is just the realities of the match quality has really kind of started to show itself, right? And now good news is that PGI is going to try to address that through redoing all the PSR stuff. That's fantastic, right? I think my rating will certainly change once we see that change in action. I don't want to rate anything based on speculation at the moment, because the new rating's not there. We don't know what the player separation is going to look like. So that's kind of why I ranked it low, because that PSR change hasn't been put into action and we haven't seen meaningful results. And those meaningful results, they'll take months. It'll take months for people to settle where they need to.
The story's not done yet.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
What we also should consider when I throw around those numbers, 5 out of 10 is kind of average, not good, not bad. And overall, our rating is still on the positive side. So that tells me that we're still on average thinking it's been a good change.
Well, also
it's just not. It hasn't lived up to the initial excitement.
I liked the first time we did ratings. Everyone's like giving it 7, 8 out of 10 and whatnot, and then I'm just like 5. And slowly over time, it's been pushed down and down.
Slowly over time, we've also all kind of dropped a little bit. Cause like I think at like the first week, I was
Spider
like,
has just convinced us. Spider can talk so much. He's gonna convince anyone.
But the thing is, though, there are good points to, like, basically like Alpha Lance, the tonnage issues, communication issues. And then I think, basically to put on my own kiboshes is that communication is that what, and then once we know the quality of this match, and hopefully PSR will resolve a few of those issues. But now also with that in mind is that if you are a player who, is maybe a little upset about the changes and this PSR change does come through, I would say play it through to see where your tier ends up. don't give up, play it through. And then after like 2-3 months, if you're like, once this PSR change, the sun is really changing my camera there. Sorry.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm getting really blown out. But yeah, there it goes again. So yeah, so like this back window kills me. I gotta cover that. But anyway, but I would say is that like after 2 or 3 months of this PSR change, once again, PGI, let us know how and when that's going to be implemented. Play for 2 or 3 months and then see where it winds up, and then at that point we'll probably all need to revisit it and say, was it good, was it bad? Go ahead.
And remember, kids, tiers are not a reward system. Supply cache is a reward system.
Yes.
Tiers are supposed to be a measure of skill. So please don't look at tier 1 as an achievement. It's not an achievement. It's a skill ranking, or supposed to be a skill ranking.
Yeah.
Just because you've played 6 years doesn't mean you've earned yourself the right to be tier 1.
Yeah, because for how as I know, I should not be where I'm at.
I'm about the low tier 2, I think. Low tier 2, high tier 3, I guess. Myself. Love to play, but I just don't really care about winning or losing. I just want to have fun and play the game, mostly for myself.
Yeah, and it kind of requires the change in thinking, like, even tier 4 is not bad. Tier 4 doesn't mean you're bad, it just means you're slightly below the average, which isn't bad. And tier 3 is totally fine. Most people should be in tier 3. So
perhaps you should just rename them. Tier 3 could become Hufflepuff.
Hufflepuff.
I like that. Give them a whole other name. Don't put a number.
So everyone, is that it for the podcast? Do we have anything else to go discuss there? I think
we've gone around a lot today.
Okay, perfect.
It's a good discussion.
Actually, I had a great time actually, and thank you, NuttyRat, for actually coming on and discussing a different perspective of different tiers and PSRs and everything about what we're talking about. And that's awesome. That's really good. You did, and you're more than welcome. Come on anytime you want to. It doesn't, just let us know.
Yeah.
And so tonight, that was the First Circuit Podcast, episode 122,000. I don't know, how would that be? 122,000? I don't know. Anyways, so we're going to go with Ian. Our guests are...
And then he turned himself into potato. Funniest shit I've ever seen.
Holy cow. Oh my God.
Sorry for de-waiting.
You're having way too much fun with that. I love it. I love it.
Potato.
If you do it for the people listening to the podcast on the radio or on different modes of
SoundCloud.
Besides SoundCloud, Ian just put himself as a potato, which kind of fits actually. So, and we have Larsh.
See you guys.
And we have NuttyRat. Thank you for being on, by the way.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful day or night or wherever you are in the world.
We have myself, Old Bob 10025. Hello, and or goodbye, and Biter.
Larg.
See you later. Bye now.
There you go.
Bye.
Bye-bye.